Hello, everybody. How are you today? We are back for another Bible story reading. For those of you who might be joining one of these videos for the first time, I want to explain to you what we are doing. We've been going through different stories in the Bible, just reading them, for people who have either never read the stories, they don't know all the stories, maybe they've only heard bits and pieces of the stories, or they've forgotten what the stories were about. So we've been going through different stories in the Bible and just taking our time going through them and learning what they are. We have been going through the book of 1 Samuel. We went through Genesis, we went through Exodus, we found out all sorts of things. We found out that God had promised these group of people through their descendant Abraham that are now called Israelites, that he was going to set them up in this special land. And he's done that. He's given them laws to abide by, and they keep questioning his laws. They don't want to live by God's rules. Well, now we get into Samuel. We're actually going to start with chapter 9. To get you caught up, what we just read is that Samuel is the appointed priest of God. And he goes around judging people and telling them, you've done something wrong, you need to change your ways, or you've done things right, and God's going to bless you. He gets all of this information from God. Well, the people are looking around at all of the lands around them, and they are seeing that everybody else has a king that rules them, that takes them out into battle, and it looks impressive. You know, these kings they dress nice, and they have chariots, and they have horses, and they have wealth, and it makes them look impressive, and they want a king. They say to Samuel, they say, your sons don't walk in the way of God, and you're old, you're going to die. We want a king. So Samuel goes to God and says, the people want a king, and he's a little upset about it, and God says, you know what, they're not rejecting you. They are rejecting me. They don't want to do things my way. Go ahead and let them have a king, but they're not going to like it because the king is going to own them. When somebody has a king, they have to pay the king a portion of their wages. The king will decide who gets to go into battle. The king is going to lead them into destruction, but they can go ahead and have a king. So now we are on chapter 9, and we're going to find out that God has chosen somebody to become their first king. Later, after we read chapter 9, as we go on through the story, we're going to find out that this particular king ends up not doing things God's way, and he brings a lot of trouble to the people of Israel. Well, because, like I tell you all the time, when God says something's going to happen, it happens. God always keeps his word. No matter what he says is going to happen, good, bad, or indifferent, it happens. So we are going to start with 1 Samuel chapter 9. There was a prominent man of Benjamin named Kish, son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Bechorath, son of Aphiath, son of a Benjamite. He had a son named Saul, an impressive young man. There was no one more impressive among the Israelites than he. He stood a head taller than anyone else. One day, the donkeys of Saul's father Kish wandered off. Kish said to his son Saul, take one of the servants with you and go look for the donkeys. Saul and his servants went through the hill country of Ephraim and then through the region of Shalishah, but they didn't find them. They went through the region of Shalim, nothing. Then they went through the Benjamite region, but still did not find them. When they came to the land of Zuph, Saul said to the servant who was with him, come on, let's go back, or my father will stop worrying about the donkeys and start worrying about us. Look, the servant said, there's a man of God in this city who is highly respected, Everything he says is sure to come true. Let's go there now. Maybe he'll tell us which way we should go. Suppose we do go, Saul said to his servant. What do we take the man? The food from our pockets is gone, and there's no gift to take the man of God. What do we have? The servant answered Saul, Here, I have a little silver. I'll give it to the man of God, and he will tell us which way we should go. Formerly, in Israel, a man who was going to inquire of God would say, Come, let us go to the seer. For the prophet of today was formerly called the seer. Good, Saul replied to his servant. Come on, let's go. So they went to the city where the man of God was. As they were climbing the hill to the city, they found some young women coming out to draw water and asked, Is the seer here? The women answered, Yes, he is ahead of you. Hurry, he has just now entered the city because there's a sacrifice for the people at the high place today. As soon as you enter the city, you will find him before he goes to the high place to eat. The people won't eat until he comes, because he must bless the sacrifice. After that, the guests can eat. Go up immediately. You can find him now. So they went up towards the city. Saul and his servant were entering the city when they saw Samuel coming toward them on his way to the high place. Now the day before Saul's arrival, the Lord had informed Samuel, At this time tomorrow I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him ruler over my people Israel. He will save them from the Philistines, because I have seen the affliction of my people, for their cry has come to me. When Samuel saw Saul, the Lord told him, Here is the man I told you about. He will govern my people. Saul approached Samuel in the city gate and asked, Would you please tell me where the seer's house is? I am the seer, Samuel answered. Go up ahead of me to the high place and eat with me today. When I send you off in the morning, I'll tell you everything that's in your heart. As for the donkeys that wandered away from you 3 days ago, don't worry about them, because they've been found. And who does all Israel desire but you and all your father's family? Saul responded, Am I not a Benjamite from the smallest of Israel's tribes? And isn't my clan the least important of all the clans of the Benjamite tribe? So why have you said something like this to me? Samuel took Saul and his servant, brought them to the banquet hall, and gave them a place at the head of the 30 or so men who had been invited. Then Samuel said to the cook, Get the portion of meat that I gave you and told you to set aside. The cook picked up the thigh and what was attached to it and set it before Saul. Then Samuel said, Notice that the reserved piece is set before you. Eat it, because it was saved for you for this solemn event at the time I said, I've invited the people. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. Afterward, they went down from the high place to the city, and Samuel spoke with Saul on the roof. They got up early, and just before dawn, Samuel called to Saul on the roof, Get up, and I'll send you on your way. Saul got up, and both he and Samuel went outside. As they were going down to the edge of the city, Samuel said to Saul, Tell the servant to go on ahead of you, but you stay for a while, and I will reveal the word of God to you. So the servant went on. We are not going to read chapter 10 today because it's quite lengthy and we have a lot to digest just in chapter 9. There are 3 ways that we look at scripture when we're learning the stories of it. We look at what it said. We have to have reading comprehension. What are the words on the page? What was it saying in context of the times? We have to know the history in the context. And what, if anything, does it say to us today? So what did we just read? We read that Saul's dad owned some donkeys that went missing. And he told Saul, he said, Get one of your servants and go look for my donkeys. You have to remember, they were expensive, like owning a car. It would be like losing a car today. So they went to go look for these donkeys. They're traveling around for 3 days. They don't find them. Saul finally says, You know what? We better head back home or my dad's going to start worrying that something happened to us. So they start to go back home. But before that, the servant says, you know what? Before we go home, why don't we check with the seer or the prophet, which would have been Samuel. Remember, Samuel was the judge, and he was the one who was who had talked to God and said, hey, your people want a king. And God said, all right, I'm going to show you someone to appoint as a king. So they find out where Samuel is, and they're talking amongst themselves. They're like, what do we bring him? You know, usually if you go see a man of God, you need to bring him something, some silver, some gift of some kind. We don't have anything. And the servant says, well, I've got a little bit in my pocket, a little bit of silver in my pocket. Let's see if he'll take that. So they go to where the town is that Samuel is, and these women tell them, oh yeah, he's getting ready to go do the sacrifice so that the people can eat. And, you know, he's got to bless the food and everything, but you need to hurry up and go catch him. So they get there and they see this guy. Well, as Saul and his servant are coming towards Samuel, God says to Samuel, that's the man that I was telling you about. That's who I want you to appoint as king. And he was very identifiable because Saul was a very tall man. He was at least a head taller than everybody else. He was tall. So Samuel he sees them and he says, hey, why don't you come with me into the banquet? And tomorrow morning I'll tell you everything. And Saul's like, I'm just an average Joe. Why would you give me this place of honor, you know, to eat with you? But they go in and they eat, and Samuel makes sure that Saul is given the choice meat. He's given a really nice portion of meat and everything. And the next morning, he says, you don't need to worry about the donkeys. They have already been found. Send your servant on ahead, but I would like for you to stay with me. And then I'm going to tell you everything that is in your heart, everything that God has told me to tell you. So he has not yet appointed or anointed Saul. He hasn't appointed him or anointed him yet. I think at this point, he's sort of just like feeling him out, you know? You know how you do that when you meet somebody and you're like, I think that's the right person for this job, or I think that's the right person, but I kind of want to get to know them a little bit just to make sure. So that's what's going on here. It's interesting that everything that God says he's going to do, he does. He told Samuel that he would appoint a king, and he's going to do that. I also find it very interesting that Saul and his servant were concerned. Like, you know, we can't just go ask a man of God to, hey, help us out here, help us out of this jam and tell us where our donkeys are. We can't just do that. We really need to bring something to him. And it wasn't Saul that had something to bring to Samuel. It was his servant. It was the servant of Saul, the guy who worked for his father, that said, I've got a little something in my pocket. We can bring that to him. I just find that very interesting. When we get into chapter 10, we're going to find out that Samuel will indeed anoint Saul as king. And it's very interesting what happens in the next chapter. You won't want to miss that, okay? So that's where we left off, chapter 9 of 1 Samuel. I hope you learned something today, and I look forward to us getting together the next time.